The attorney didn't look at her when he spoke. That was the first thing Priya Nair noticed, sitting in the back row of the hearing room with a legal pad she hadn't written a word on yet. She'd been told, walking in, that this would be a short one, a routine benefits appeal, 15 minutes on the docket, the kind of case nobody from the clinic usually bothered to sit in on. Priya had come anyway, because her supervisor had said the company's attorney would be Garrett Voss, and because the supervisor had said his name the way you'd warn someone about weather. Your Honor, with respect, this is a sympathy claim. Voss didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He was trim, gray-suited, with the kind of unhurried courtesy that made everything he said sound like he was doing the room a favor. Mrs. Calloway lost her husband. That's a tragedy, and no one disputes it. But grief isn't evidence. She's asking this court to overturn a properly conducted benefits review based on nothing but her own testimony, offered 18 months after the fact, from a woman who, and I say this gently, has every emotional reason to believe what she wants to believe. He gestured, not unkindly, toward the woman seated at the petitioner's table. Eleanor Calloway was somewhere in her late 60s, in a gray cardigan over a plain blouse, hands folded on the table in front of her. She didn't flinch. She didn't look down. She watched Voss the way you'd watch weather, something to be aware of, not something that could touch you. I'd move to strike her testimony as unreliable, Voss went on, and asked the court to affirm the company's determination as filed. Mrs. Calloway is, I'm sure, a grieving widow with nothing left to lose by trying, but this hearing isn't the place to relitigate sympathy. Priya's pen finally moved, scratching one word onto the pad. Nothing left to lose. She'd been warned about Voss before she sat in on her first hearing for the Veterans Benefits Clinic. He's good, her supervisor had said. Asterisk, he's polite. That's what makes him good, asterisk. Judge Renata Pace looked up from the folder in front of her. She was younger than Priya expected for the bench, maybe 50, dark hair pulled back, reading glasses low on her nose. Mr. Voss, before I rule on that motion, I have a question about the file. She turned a page. The denial letter your company sent to Mrs. Calloway in March cites, and I'm reading directly, insufficient documentation of the decedent's continuous service record at time of death. Is that the company's position today? It is, Your Honor. And has the company received any correspondence from the Department of Veterans Affairs Pension Office regarding Sergeant Calloway's service record, at any point since his death? Voss's pause was small. Almost nothing. But Priya, 4 feet behind him, saw his hand move toward the case file on the table in front of him, then stop, then settle back onto his legal pad instead. Not that I'm aware of, Your Honor. If such correspondence exists, it isn't part of the company's claim file. It isn't, the judge repeated. Not a question. She said it the way you'd repeat a number back to make sure you'd heard it right. No, Your Honor. Eleanor Calloway hadn't moved. But something had changed in her face, not surprise, Priya thought. Recognition. Like a door she'd knocked on a long time ago, finally creaking. Mrs. Calloway, the judge said, turning to her. You submitted, with your petition, a copy of a determination letter from the VA Pension Office dated this past January. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor. Eleanor's voice was steady, unhurried. I sent a copy to the insurance company in February. Certified mail. I have the receipt. And the company's records show no such letter was received. That's what they told me, Your Honor. I called in March, after the denial came. They said they had no record of it. The judge was quiet for a moment. Then she looked at the case file in front of Voss, a thick accordion folder, tabs color-coded, the kind that took weeks to assemble. Mr. Voss, I'd like the company's complete claim file produced for the court. Right now. All correspondence, including anything that may have been received and not entered into the formal record. Your Honor, the file in front of me is the certified file. If there's additional, then we'll look at the certified file. The judge's tone hadn't sharpened, but it had settled, the way a level settles when the bubble finds center. Bring it up, please. The bailiff carried the folder to the bench. Judge Pace opened it methodically, page by page, the room silent except for the soft sound of paper turning. Priya found she was holding her breath. Beside her, an older man in a windbreaker, another clinic volunteer, there for a different case, leaned forward slightly, the way people lean toward a radio when the signal starts to come in clearer. The folder was thick, color-coded tabs, a denial letter on top in the company's own crisp letterhead, then page after page of correspondence, appeal forms, intake notes, a printed email chain about scheduling. Priya watched the judge's hands move through it without hurry, the way someone sorts mail they're not in a rush to open, until partway through the second tab she stopped. She held a single page up, briefly, angling it toward the light from the window, then set it down without comment and kept going. 2 more pages. Then she stopped again, and this time she didn't move on. Mr. Voss. She held up a single sheet, letterhead visible even from the back row, an eagle seal, dense block text. This is a determination letter from the Department of Veterans Affairs Pension Management Center, dated January 14th of this year. It confirms Sergeant Thomas Calloway's full 22 years of continuous active and reserve service, verified directly against DoD personnel records, and confirms his eligibility, and by extension his surviving spouse's eligibility, for full survivor's pension benefits at the standard rate. It is stamped, received by your company's claims intake office on February 9th. It has been in this file the entire time. The silence that followed had weight to it. Priya could feel it the way you feel a change in air pressure. Your Honor, I wasn't aware. I believe you, Mr. Voss. I don't think you personally hid this letter. The judge's voice was even. But your office had it for 4 months before issuing a denial that explicitly claimed insufficient documentation of the same service record this letter verifies. And today, in open court, your office represented to me, and to Mrs. Calloway, that no such correspondence existed. She set the letter down, squared it against the folder, and looked out at the room, not at Voss now, but past him, toward Eleanor. Mrs. Calloway. I'm going to read this letter into the record, in full, so there's no ambiguity about what it says or when it arrived. She picked it back up. This letter confirms that Sergeant Thomas R. Calloway, service number ending 4471, served 22 years of continuous qualifying service, verified against Department of Defense personnel records as of December of last year. Per federal survivor benefit regulations, his surviving spouse, Eleanor M. Calloway, is determined eligible for full survivor's pension at the standard monthly rate, retroactive to the date of the service member's death. The judge looked up. Signed, the Regional Pension Management Center Director. Dated January 14th. She set it down a second time. Mr. Voss's motion to strike Mrs. Calloway's testimony is denied. More than that, based on this record, I'm reversing the company's denial outright. The full survivor's pension is reinstated, retroactive to the date of Sergeant Calloway's death, as the VA's own determination already required. The company will calculate the retroactive payment and submit it to this court for verification within 30 days. Voss had gone very still. Priya watched him, not gloating, not afraid exactly, just a man recalculating everything he thought he knew about the next 10 minutes of his life. Additionally, the judge went on, I'm entering a finding of bad faith against the company's handling of this claim, specifically, the issuance of a denial that contradicted documentation already in its possession, and a representation to this court, today, that no such documentation existed. I'll be referring this finding to the State Insurance Regulator's Office for review of the company's claims practices more broadly. This isn't the first such referral from this courtroom this year, Mr. Voss. I'd encourage your client to take it seriously. Yes, Your Honor. Voss's voice had lost its smoothness entirely. He pulled the folder back toward himself and began turning pages, slower than the judge had, as if checking, too late, whether there was anything else in there he should have already known. And Mr. Voss. The judge looked at him directly now, not unkindly, but without softness either. You stood in front of this woman and called her claim a sympathy play. You said grief wasn't evidence, and you were right, it isn't. The letter was the evidence. It was sitting in your own file the entire time. I think you owe Mrs. Calloway an apology, on the record, for the characterization, regardless of who failed to flag the letter for you. Voss turned. For a moment he didn't say anything. Then, Mrs. Calloway, I apologize. For the characterization, and for the position my client put you through these past months. That wasn't right. Eleanor inclined her head, just slightly. Thank you, she said. Not warm, not cold. Just acknowledgement, the kind you'd give a stranger who'd held a door. We'll take a 15-minute recess, the judge said, and then move to the next matter. The room began to stir, chairs, papers, low conversation. Priya found herself moving before she'd decided to, crossing to where Eleanor Calloway was gathering a small stack of folders into a canvas tote bag, unhurried, the same pace she'd kept through the entire hearing. Mrs. Calloway, I'm with the Veterans Benefits Clinic. Priya hesitated. You knew. Before she read it. You knew the letter was in there. I knew it existed, Eleanor said. I didn't know if anyone would find it. I sent it certified because I wanted there to be a record, even if nobody ever looked at it. She zipped the tote closed, the small metallic sound of it the loudest thing in the emptying room. Tom used to say the army taught him one thing above everything else: keep your paperwork, because someday somebody who doesn't know your name will decide something about your life based on it. I figured the least I could do was make sure the paperwork was right, even if I had to wait for someone to read it. 18 months, Priya said. You waited 18 months for someone to read 4 pages. I had the time. Eleanor's voice was even, almost gentle. What I didn't have was any reason to expect kindness. So I made sure I didn't need it. The letter didn't need anyone to feel sorry for me. It just needed someone to look. She picked up the tote bag, nodded once toward Priya, the same small nod she'd given Voss, exactly as much as the moment required and not a fraction more, and walked out of the hearing room at her own unhurried pace, toward the elevators, toward whatever came next, owing nothing to anyone's sympathy and needing none. Priya stood by the empty petitioner's table for a long moment after she'd gone. The room had mostly cleared for the recess, someone propping the door open, voices in the hallway, a cart of files being wheeled past. Through the window, she could see Eleanor Calloway crossing the courthouse plaza below, tote bag over her shoulder, walking at the same unhurried pace she'd kept through the entire hearing, not looking back, not needing to. Priya thought about the 18 months. About a woman mailing 4 pages of federal letterhead to a company that had every reason to read it and didn't, then waiting, not arguing, not calling every week, just waiting, with the receipt kept somewhere safe, for a room and a judge willing to actually open the file. She thought about how close it had come to not happening at all, if the judge hadn't asked the one question, if the folder had stayed closed, if Voss's polite paragraph had simply been allowed to stand, as it probably had 100 times before, in 100 other rooms. Then she sat back down, picked up her pen, and under the one phrase she'd already written, nothing left to lose, she wrote a second line, for herself, for the next hearing, and the one after that, check the file first. When her supervisor came to find her for the next case, Priya was still looking at the 2 lines on the pad. Good first one, he asked. He was polite the whole time, Priya said. That's the part one keep thinking about. He never raised his voice. He just assumed nobody would look closely enough to prove him wrong. She closed the pad. I think that's worse, somehow. Her supervisor nodded, like he'd had the thought himself more than once. That's why we look closely, he said, and held the door for her, and they went into the next room, and the next file, and whoever was waiting in it.